Today we're going to do two things. First of all, I want to give you an update on the 1093 versus 365 KvK, and I even want to give you a few predictions on how things are shaping up so far in this true paradise of forts. In addition, we're going to talk about my restart KvK, where the matchmaking just wrapped up and the allies have been determined. And we're down on KP and we're down on power, so it's going to be an interesting KvK for sure. Let's get reviewing. Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and today's video is sponsored by the makers of Rise of Kingdoms. And if you've been following along with my channel, you know that I've got strong feelings about the role of forts in Rise of Kingdoms. And when you queue up for the Orleans KvK, you'd better be able to drop hundreds of forts, no kidding, because that is the way that this fight is defined. Forts on 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 forts. There are like, I want to say, in the realm of at least 50 to, I mean, there's like 50 to 100 forts down in this KvK right now, which is nutty. So why is that? Well, yesterday for 1093 versus 365, the passes opened. And what's so crazy about the setup of this KvK is that both 1093 and 365, who's sitting all the way up at the top, had access to both Zone 6s. So these Zone 6s surround the equivalent of Kingsland. This is Orleans. And both kingdoms went both ways, which is funny joke that if you've been around for a while, you know the both ways joke. So if we go and get a look here on the left-hand side, 1093 got a pretty good jump, but 365 has a strong ally in 18, and that is Kingdom 1818, I believe, right? We go over here. Yep, 1818. So these guys, look at this. They won 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, and 10. And they've got Arvix accounts in here and also all the cigar accounts. I think the cigar group, people were saying in my live stream yesterday, is like a whale group that, you know, goes around and whales stuff together. And I think I may have fought against them in the past. So 1093 has to fight these guys over here, along with others. And the entry into the zone for 1093 went pretty good, although they did lose a fort, maybe two in this zone. I think just one. They were able to take out some forts themselves, and they've built all the way up to this river. Now, look, I spent a lot of time at this river when I fought against 365. 365 knows this river all too well. They know how to fight it. They know how to defend it. And the thing that 365 is going to do, and the thing that 93 is going to have to do if they want to be able to stand a chance, is basically every flag you get forward, you need to lock in with a fort before you go to bed. So literally every square of progress, if you don't lock it in with a fort, you can expect to lose it by the time you wake up. That's just the way this KvK works. If you don't lock literally every flag with a fort, you can wake up to that progress evaporated. And it's going to be back fort after 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 back fort. This is just the reality of the KvK. And I hope that's not coming across as complaining. It's just the facts. The fact is, if you do not fort all the things, then you lose all the things. So this is going to be a really difficult position to gain progress. And I think, quite frankly, there will not be any progress on this side of the map until Kingsland opens. I genuinely think that this is where the map is going to be, possibly when Kingsland opens. If 1093 has a absolutely dominating presence and is able to really push, then maybe they can shove up the left side, bottleneck this pass, get to this river, but by the time they get to this river, they can expect fort after fort after fort after fort after fort after fort. And I don't know that any meaningful ground will be able to be gained. The only thing that they might be able to contest, if they get a steamroll going, is this particular circle, which has some amount of days until it's even going to open. So I think the only realistic objective in this zone, in terms of progression, is the circle. I think it's completely unrealistic that they would get all the way to this pass. I would love to be proven wrong about what can be done in this KvK and that the fort meta does not stop all progress, but I think it does stop all progress. So even if the folks in 365 and their allies are just straight losing, and they just slow roll the forts, I still think that there's no way that this pass gets taken. So what you're really fighting for at this point is passes into Kingsland. I think this pass is pretty safe. I do think, however, that all this open land over here is a disaster waiting to happen. I think that if 93 is not careful, they run a very, 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 very high risk of getting dropped in their downtime. And I really think that this is a huge vulnerability that they have open right now. I'm not saying they can't build flags and handle it. I'm just saying the door is open to drop 93 right now if they don't address this territory. And up here, the door is open to drop 365 if they don't address this territory. I would know because 365 literally dropped us like that. So they dropped like over here, and it was a pain in the ass. So I think it would be a huge mistake to not address these huge gaps that are still on the map. Dropping is still possible. I think that it's actually more exposed up here, actually. So is what it is. Down over here, it looks like most fort drop spots are pretty well covered. And as we look to the sort of right side of the map, I think that 365 had a really good opener here. The fact that 365 pushed all the way to this circle is actually really good for 365. So if we count progress in terms of circles, let's lock that in real quick. So 365 has 1, 2, 3 circles guaranteed. 1093 has 1, 2 circles guaranteed. And there's 1 circle in contention. So I think this opener favored 365. And we can measure that again in terms of the circles. But it's even just visually easy to see that, like, yeah, 365 got further in the zone. And people think I might be knocking on 1093. I'm not. I'm just, like, this is the situation. And I've been in this situation. I was here. I know the spot you're in. I was fighting 365. I have been here. Okay? So instead of being at this circle, the circle that I was at was the one above it. So I've got a little bit more experience. I think it was this circle where it was just a long contention for a long time. Anyways, all that to say, can 1093 get the kind of progress they'd need over here? I'm not so sure. Their allies do have some land, but they're getting kind of bottled up over here. You can see 365 is just going in and cleaning up all this territory. So yesterday, the allies of 1093, I think, had a lot more territory coming out this direction. And it looks like 365 is really just kind of pushed in and cleaned up. So they're going to have to re-engage through this pass or with a fort drop to kind of get their way back into the zone and to be relevant with some field. But that leaves 1093 in just the really awkward position of being kind of the front line over here and the front line over here. I think it is a precarious spot for 1093. And people were saying in my live stream that the 365 group had better allies, even though one of the 365 allies literally had a civil war. Hello? It's 2023, and you go into a KvK like this, and you have a civil war. You know, I guess anything is possible these days. Like, I cannot fathom a reason that would be worth civil warring in the middle of a gigantic KvK like this. But despite the fact that a 365 ally was civil warring, I think their ally advantage here is really showing. And yeah, they have a strong position. So 1093, in my opinion, finds themselves in the kind of precarious position of an uphill battle, I think. That is my prediction based on what I'm seeing so far. Everybody wants to see an underdog get a win, you know? So I think a lot of people root for the underdog, which I think 1093, I can say, is in this instance. So we'll see what they're able to pull off here, but they just have a lot of work ahead of them. And congratulations again to them on winning an Ark of Osiris League. The team that they beat in Ark of Osiris League to become the champion, by the way, is it still here? Yeah, was JST. So, yeah, the Scuffed Tigers beat 365 in Ark League. But 365 may get the revenge in this KvK. More coverage on this to follow in the coming weeks. I'll definitely try to stream their Kingsland, depending on exactly when that timing is. So if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, definitely consider smashing that subscribe button. What I want to show you now is my restart KvK. This is my restart account, chilling at 93 million power. And in terms of the KvK we queued for, it's Warriors Unbound, and we actually got an opponent found. And weirdly enough, there are actually no Imperiums in this KvK. I think that at one point, 1647 was an Imperium, and 1824 was briefly flipped Imperium, but there's no true Imperiums, I think, in this KvK, other than 1647, I think, used to be really strong, and they still are, but I think they had a migration out at some point. But still, like, let's go look at the stats and the map and talk about how this shapes up. So here's a view of the Warriors Unbound map, and this is going to be a top versus bottom map. And if we just do some quick math on the total power for the top, the total power for the bottom, the total KP for the bottom, and total KP for the top team has 94.1 billion power, whereas the bottom camp has 83.9 billion power. This comes from having one less kingdom in the bottom camp. So there's one entire additional kingdom in the top group of camps. In addition, you're looking at 2.016 trillion kill points for the top and 1.726 trillion kill points for the bottom. So about 300 million kill points of differential in favor of the top. So the top has more power, the top has more kill points. It's not an astronomical amount more. I mean, you know, like I said in the past, I've been in KvKs where the teams are like, yeah, you're down like 2 trillion kill points. It's even. What are you talking about? Which is like ridiculous, right? We all know that's ridiculous, but I think the weirdness here is this KvK is so much about pass fights. It's like, it's insane how much of this KvK is going to be just pass fighting. So let me show you what happens here, okay? First fights happen, assuming that the allies stay top versus bottom. I'm not in the Diplo. I don't actually have a pulse on what's going on, really. This is just what I heard, is I think it's a top versus bottom situation. That could change. So let's just assume a hypothetical. If it's a top versus bottom situation, what does it look like? So here you go. So you would have Fire Camp pushing down, and I'm going to draw blue for us and our allies. We're in the bottom left. We would push up into this zone. And it's hard to say who wins here. I don't know. I think from a kill point standpoint, obviously they've got more KP than we do. And I remember their open field is, in fact, really, really strong. We've allied with them in the past. If you look over here, there's going to be a fight. And I don't know who wins this zone. If it's our ally, 1824, they've got to be super legit to beat the two kingdoms in the top. And they basically need to have a very strong field presence in order to do that. They need to like really dominate in the field in order to be able to do that. And although the top side has more kingdoms, the difference here is that the individual punch has to be much higher in 1824 compared to these two kingdoms up here. So it is definitely possible for 1824 to win, although it's obviously difficult fighting into two kingdoms. Okay, so with that said, a couple zones are free. Okay, this zone is free. This zone is free. This zone is free. This zone is free. And the thing that I do like about a top versus bottom situation is that it does, I think, create the possibility of a more even Kingsland, maybe. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So the next passes that open, okay, are the level 5 passes. And I can show you those are over here, right? Level 5 passes, right? So these are your level 5 passes. This is where the next entryway happens. There's another one right over there. All right, so this is a safe-ish zone initially. Let me explain. You get like a day and a half or maybe 2 days to set up in this zone before the next pass is open. It's very fast. It's shockingly fast. So we will go into that zone with our allies in green, okay? 1647 goes into their zone with 1801 and 2856. And our allies enter into this zone over here. Now, I'm going to draw this with an arrow just to be super clear that it's one kingdom going here, okay? And it's the two kingdoms going over here, but it's still one war camp versus one war camp. So whatever happened here, you'd think, oh, it's just going to be a repeat, right? Like it just ends up being a repeat of whatever sort of had just happened, right? but it's not exactly the case, okay? Because what happens next is the level 6 passes open. And which kingdoms can actually go through those level 6 passes is kind of limited. So if I'm not mistaken, although 1647 could theoretically path all the way around, they can't actually go through those passes. So what happens here is, I think 1801 and 2056 can then enter through the level 6 passes. And I think 1682 and 2175 can enter through these passes. So this fight gets kind of contentious as sort of a 2 war camp versus 2 war camp. Very exciting, quite frankly, to see all that go down. And so that's going to be going on. Meanwhile, okay, a couple things are going to be happening. Depending on which team wins the fight on the left, if it's, 1647 or if it's 2293, one of those camps is going to be pushing on a level 6 pass. So I'm going to draw it in yellow. Either we're going to be defending this pass, or we're going to be attacking this pass. It all depends on who wins that leftmost zone, right? And the same is like sort of true, like in terms of position advantage, like whoever wins this zone does get entry through here, all right? So there is a faster entry point into this zone, which can be relevant, okay? It could definitely be relevant. Remember, however, that in this version of KvK, you can only drop forts on top of holy sites and also on top of passes. So, going to be interesting. Going to be very, very, very interesting how that all kind of unfolds with that big fight. Field presence matters a lot, but also whoever builds the fort first gets a huge advantage. So let's say this zone ends up stalemated. And I would say that almost in like a perfect world, it ends up stalemated, because then we have a really interesting Kingsland fight that happens, okay? So if this zone gets split, then you're looking at what happens next. The level 7 passes open. Okay. And after the level 7 passes open, and it looks like, by the way, when I last did this, there were 2 level 7 passes. So this is a little bit different than I remember it. So kind of surprising they removed a pass here. But then after that, the Kingsland passes open. So then you've got your Kingsland fight. Okay? And the thing we're fighting for is how many of these level 8 passes is any one side going to get? If we, or one side, wins or loses the zone, they're going to get 4 passes into Kingsland, which, like, obviously that's a pretty big advantage. And you can still have 3 war camps from each side go into Kingsland. So, for example, if we did lose this zone over here, water camp could go through here and go into this Kingsland pass, hypothetically. There's still opportunity to have a 3 war camp versus 3 war camp Kingsland, even if one side or another ends up losing this other zone. How this is going to go, I don't know. Should be pretty exciting. I think from a KP standpoint, we've got kind of an uphill battle against 1647, and I know that their fielders are good, but we'll kind of see, which kingdoms end up winning. I think it's going to be an exciting KvK, actually. This should be very fun to watch. So if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, consider smashing that subscribe button. And if you want to see the pass opening that happened yesterday for the 1093 versus 1365 KvK, definitely check out the card in the end screen. It was really exciting.